Hello, good evening, everyone. I am State Representative Janet Yang Rohr. This is the 41st District Town Hall. I hope everyone has been able to stay safe, stay dry these last few days. There's been a lot of weather events, but it seems like pretty much our district has been relatively unscathed and all that. So, hopefully you have all been able to get your branches cleaned up and your power back on. And thank you for joining us tonight for this 41st District Town Hall. So today we're going to go through a few things. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened over the last few months during the spring legislative regular session. We're going to talk a little bit about what passed through the House, the Senate, what's going over to the governor's office for his signature. We also have Donna Wanke here. She is the chief of staff for the 41st District, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening at home too in the district and some of the activities going on here. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I just want to remind everyone that this is me. I'm the state representative for the 41st District, representing Naperville, Bolingbrook, and Warrenville. From this area, graduate of Naperville North High School, went on to Northwestern and then Chicago Booth for my MBA. And my family and I have lived here for many years now, and hope to for many more years. And it is such a privilege and honor to represent the district and the community where I grew up. So let me to maybe set the stage for everyone. I'm going to give everyone a sense for where we are in the legislative calendar. So basically, it runs in a cycle that's pretty predictable. So from January through about May to the beginning of June-ish, that is the General Assembly regular session. And that is where we introduce our bills. For me, I get things passed through the House, pass it over to the Senate, where it gets passed through the Senate, hopefully, and then on to the governor for his signature. During that time, we're passing legislation, we're passing bills, we're also trying to pass a budget. So lots of negotiations going on all around. And then going into the summer months, so about June, July, August, that's when we have a lot of our research going on. We run a series of citizen advisory panels where we go into a real deep dive into topics that people in the district have told me they really care about. We talk about some of the bills that have passed, but more importantly, we talk about the issues that people are seeing, and think about ways that we can address those things. So we will, of course, go through a little bit of a look forward into what some of the things we're looking at in those areas are. The summer is also when the governor's office and the governor, they take their time to research the bills that have passed the House and the Senate to basically, figure out if they're going to sign those bills into law, because, for every bill that passes, for every law that becomes a law, it needs to pass the House, it needs to pass the Senate, it needs a governor's signature. And so those are kind of the checks and balances that go on in the Illinois House. After that, so after kind of that summer activity, that research, that's when we have a pretty good sense of what we're going to work on for the next legislative session. So that's where we are working with a lot of our research groups and lawyers to draft legislation to be introduced into the next January session. Also during this time, we have veto session. This year we'll also have a lame duck session, and those are basically times to address bills or legislation that have like a really timely component to it, things that must be passed, for example, by the end of the year, or just things that we didn't quite get to during the regular session. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we might be seeing in those coming months and in the fall veto session. So uh, just as a reminder to everyone, this is this page showing our objectives for the 41st District. This is really how my office and I basically prioritize our work. Based on feedback that we've heard from you, based on things you've told us, emails, phone calls, meeting you at your doors. These are really the areas where we have seen the most interest, where we see the most concern, and where we think that our efforts are best put. So that's in the areas of affordable health care, making sure that people have access to health care, making sure that insurance stays affordable. Um, we focus on building a sustainable environment, so addressing areas like climate change, addressing, for this district in particular, things like Naperville's coal-fired power plants, and trying to figure a way to get past that. Good government is very important. That's about many things. It's about passing a balanced budget. It's about having good ethics to guide our behavior. Um, we care very deeply about women's rights in this district. So that runs the gamut from, of course, abortion access, making sure that people have the choice with their bodies, but also things like making sure that women have good opportunities and good services available to them. Because a lot of times, as I think you'll see as we go through some of the legislation, that is still, even in this day and age, not always the case. Uh, for our district in particular, I mean, obviously for all of Illinois, but our district, I think, very deeply cares about having a quality education and quality public schools available to everyone. So, we spend a lot of time there. And of course, economic development, taxes, making sure that businesses, small businesses in particular, are supported. That's a very important one. And underlying all of this within our objectives is kind of looking at through the lens of diversity and inclusion, making sure that we're bringing everyone along on this journey, making sure that everyone has every opportunity to succeed and really fulfill their potential. So, in getting through or making sure that we're addressing all those objectives, there are a few ways to do that, and one of the ways is through committee assignments. So in the Illinois House, one of the ways that one of the areas where we really get our work done is in committees. And so that's where we go into deep dives into bills and really question things. And so my committee assignments are really informed by those objectives that we've laid out for the district. And so first, I am the vice chair of the Personnel and Pensions Committee, and for a few reasons, of course, because our district cares deeply about those kind of fiscal issues, but also my background is in investing, it's in finance, and so that's one of the areas where I think I can bring a lot of my experience to bear for the state and for our district. I'm a member of almost every single education committee that's in the House. So that means appropriations for K through 12 as well as higher education. It also means being on the committees for K through 12 curriculum policies and administration, licensing, and charters. So a lot of that is, for example, looking at learning standards and looking at what's being taught in schools and who's teaching them. Other committee assignments include healthcare availability and access. So that goes back to making sure that we have affordable healthcare, making sure that healthcare is accessible to everyone. And also, I am part of the small business and tech innovation committees. So a nice kind of wide breadth of topics covered there.
Janet, we have a question from our community. How do you carry the voice of the 41st District to Springfield?
Yeah, well, so a few different ways. One of the most basic is, of course, in the legislation and the voting. What I'm trying to do when I take my votes, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of votes that are taken every year when you count like all the amendments, when you count all the so there, always trying to channel the district, making sure that the things that people elected me for, that I'm doing that. And the committee work is a big part of that, but there are also lots of other ways. So I'm thinking, for example, caucuses are very important. I'm a part of the environmental caucus, which is called the Green Caucus. I'm part of the Moderate Caucus, and so it's like a very kind of fiscally oriented group. I'm also part of the Asian American Caucus and the Women's Caucus. So those are the things again those are the things that the district has told me is very important to them, and so I want to make sure that I am representing us on those caucuses. And those caucuses, if you think about it, those are basically groups of like-minded individuals. And so when we have certain priorities, for example, that we can really band together and make sure they get passed and get done.
Thanks.
Um,
And I'm just gonna let you know as we have any questions that come into the chat and encourage people to put questions in the chat and we'll try to get them on the slide that's appropriate, but otherwise we also will get some questions at the end. So thanks, Janet.
yeah, perfect. Happy to do that. So maybe as we go along, I had touched upon our citizen advisory panels, but here I'll just show everyone these are the citizen advisory panels that we have. So typically the schedule is around June, sometimes going into July, but just around the beginning of summer, we have these topic-specific panels. So on education, on healthcare, on the environment, and we really, we literally sit around a table and do a deep dive with people in the community about these topics. We cover in detail, in much more detail probably than we'll see today. Today we'll just do the super highlights, but we go into legislation that is passed, legislation that we're working on in the district, and again, most importantly, what are the things that people in the district are seeing that we can address either through legislation or through sometimes it's calling a department head, and there are lots of things actually that come through these citizen advisory panels. One of the most important too, though, is when we get those ideas. We have a great intern team every summer. I feel like every single year it gets even better and better, who do a lot of the research into seeing how we address these issues. So, if anyone is ever interested in going deeper into these topics, or they see something that they want addressed, I very much encourage you to come to these, and let's work together to see what we can do. Now, for most of the rest of the town hall, what I was planning to do was basically go into each of the pillars. So these slides are roughly organized by pillars, and we'll talk about some of the big pieces of legislation that got through. That are either a lot of them have been signed, some of them are sitting with the governor's desk right now. And we'll talk about some of the things coming from our office, and we'll lightly touch upon some of the things that we think will happen next year. But of course, we also have town halls throughout the year and we'll talk about those too. So first, on the healthcare front, House Bill 5395 is a very important piece of legislation. I think that it was actually already signed last month. So this is the Healthcare Protection Act, really the part two of the Healthcare Protection Act. We have passed some legislation last year that address some of these issues here. House Bill 579 from last year, what it did was eliminate unfair and really unchecked rate increases for individual and small group plans. And then this bill that we passed this year continued that work by expanding it to large group plans, for a state-based insurance market. It did a lot of other things too, actually. So banning step therapy, for example, what that does is really puts power back into the hands of doctors and patients. And so in doing that, essentially insurance companies cannot require or require a patient to try basically a cheaper medicine before, or a cheaper treatment before they are able to try what the doctor actually recommends for you. So that's a really important one. House Bill 5395 also prohibits requiring of prior authorization for inpatient psychiatric treatments. So, basically those experiencing a crisis, they have access to care immediately, and they don't have to, go through all the rigmarole of trying to get permission from their insurance providers. The bill also makes sure that those that basically junk insurance plans are prohibited. This is also already done in 12 other states. Those are plans that really, when you look into the details, don't cover very much, and they certainly don't cover pre-existing conditions, which is a problem for a lot of people. Um, it requires that insurance companies post treatments that do require prior authorizations. So, if you are shopping around for an insurance plan, that you'll be able to really do better comparisons for your insurance provider. Another thing that's pretty important that it does is it requires stricter standards when an insurance company is updating their in-network care directories. So it has to reflect actual availability. So, and it has to show whether doctors, for example, are accepting new patients and removing those that are either no longer in network or no longer practicing. And I remember the just last year going through the frustration of that, like going through those in-network directories and calling doctor after doctor after doctor, trying to find someone and finding out that this person or that person no longer practiced. So I think that transparency will be a really good thing. Um, as we go through, I will also in these topics talk about the budget because these bills uh, they enact there are many different ways to enact policy. You can do it through legislation, but you can also do it through the budget, and where you spend your money is oftentimes where your priorities lie. And so one within healthcare, which I think is so important, is House Bill 5290, which was funded with $10 million from the fiscal year 25 budget. What it does is it erases $1 billion in medical debt and we believe it'll affect about 300,000 Illinois households. So within healthcare, I think it's important to spend some time on kind of a subset of that, which is the opioid epidemic. And it's one where our office has focused a lot of our attention, just because it is affecting a lot of people. And we're doing it in a few different ways, as you'll see in this page. So House Bill 4219, that is an extension of a bill that we passed last year. Last year, we passed a bill that basically requires health classes in public schools and public high schools to teach about the dangers of fentanyl. And, during that House debate last year, that House floor debate, we had the Republican leader actually say, like, why are we starting in high school? Shouldn't we be starting this earlier because it's affecting more and more people? And that was a great idea. And on the floor, I committed to her that I would work on that. And so this is the result of those efforts. And so House Bill 4219, it requires the teaching of the dangers of fentanyl starting in junior high. So starting with public schools in sixth, seventh, eighth grade is when they'll start teaching about the dangers of fentanyl. House Bill 5208, or sorry, 5028, basically addresses opioid fentanyl overdose reversal medication. So, I think the brand name is naloxone, but it allows state buildings and workplaces to have that opioid overdose reversal medication on hand. And then we plan, and you can see on the page, the National Safety Council, we worked hand in glove with them to pass that legislation because, when you look at workplace deaths, a huge proportion of them are related to opioid overdoses. And so House Bill 5028, it starts with like public and state workplaces, and the plan is to hopefully in the next legislative session address the private sector and probably put some frameworks in place to allow the private sector to do the same thing and have those reversal medications on hand. I had mentioned before that you can affect policy change in many different ways, whether that's passing a bill or passing items in a budget. Another way you can do it is by introducing bills that start conversations that really, luckily spur people to act. And so House Bill 4294 is an example of that, where there have been bills passed in the past that allow our schools to have certain medications available, and so naloxone is one of those, that opioid overdose medication, and there are others like those that treat, for example, diabetes or that treat allergic reactions. The problem is that the schools were having a hard time getting those medications, even though they were allowed to have them. There were just so many hoops to jump through to get it from like a prescriber that. So we introduced a bill that would require the Illinois Department of Public Health to have standing orders of prescriptions, so that schools could get those prescriptions easily. But just it turns out the act of introducing the bill, introducing that topic, spurred people to action. And so their Department of Public Health is going to go ahead and issue those standing orders, which is a great outcome, I think, for our schools and our students.
Okay, we got another question from the community, Janet. It says, is the opioid crisis something that we're experiencing directly in our community?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is something that is affecting our community members and people in our district directly. And I know, for some people that can be kind of surprising. And that but the reality is that it is happening to our neighbors, to those around us that we might not see. I had mentioned that our office has done um, a lot of bills around the opioid epidemic. An example of that from a few years ago was the passage of Alex's Law, which provides protections for people who are trying to seek treatment or seek emergency treatment for those experiencing an overdose. And that came directly from a constituent, the family of a constituent who very sadly experienced that loss because of an overdose. And then the dangers of fentanyl education, the original bill that required the teaching of dangers of fentanyl for high schoolers, that actually came from a student in our district who also um, directly experienced it in her own family. So for not everyone, I guess, will see it, but it is absolutely happening all around us. And so these bills are really just trying to address that and to um, you know hopefully put a stop to it. So maybe continuing on, I'd say uh, issues brought to us by senior citizens are very important because a lot of times these are some of our most vulnerable cohorts. And so here in this slide, you can see actually a picture of Monarch Landing, which is kind of at the northern tip of the district. We had a few constituents from Monarch Landing and from actually around the state come to us about an issue they were facing with entry fees that people are required to pay to get into these communities. So they're called Continuing Care Retirement Communities, CCRCs. And the long story short, the way they work is um, oftentimes you pay a very large lump sum at the beginning, like that entry fee, and then with the understanding or the agreement that when you leave the community, you'll get a certain percentage of that lump sum back. And so for a lot of people, it is a very good way to um, kind of age in place and get the care that you need as you get older and maybe need more services, but in a way that lets you pass on a legacy to your heirs, for example. And so when it works well, it's fine. The way it has to work is when you leave the community, when someone else takes up residence in your unit, that's when and they pay their entry fee, then the community can pay back your portion of the entry fee. Um, But what was happening in some of these places, in particular, in Schaumburg, there was a community called Friendship Village that went bankrupt. People weren't getting their entry fees back, or they were taking very long to get them. In the Friendship Village case, people were getting 10 cents on the dollar for what they were owed. So, when you think about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that that these residents were paying to get in, that was a lot of money lost. So House Bill 4276, it really is a consumer protection type of bill, and requires these CCRCs to provide much more disclosure about their fees and how quickly people were actually getting these entry fees back. Um, so that is, I would consider kind of the baby step, the first step to protecting residents of CCRCs. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of interest in this. So we're working with other legislators on part two, part three, part four of legislation that's similar to this. We have actually a few other states on the East and West Coast that have mandated entry fee refunds, or putting basically requiring CCRCs to pay back those refunds on a certain time frame. So that will probably be parts two or three of this, but it's definitely something that we're going to continue to work on. Um, from a budget perspective, also we've made sure to invest here. So in the fiscal year 25 budget, we allotted $70 million to the community care program. So this is one that brings workers into homes to serve older adults. And it does a few things at the same time. It of course provides that care, but usually doing so does it in a pretty cost-effective way. So it turns out to be a pretty good um, policy for everyone involved. Now, onto the topic of in the environment and environment and sustainability. This is one of the areas where we get a lot of interest from the district, and so I'll just kind of hit the highlights. There were a number of pieces of legislation that hits on this, but I think these are the areas where maybe I think our district would have the most interest. And starting with Senate Bill 1289. So this basically, this bill puts limits on carbon capture and sequestration efforts. So carbon capture is basically a way to oftentimes take carbon from the air, for example, from a coal plant, and store it and put it in the ground. So there's a lot of worry about the viability of that from a few different angles, from a scale perspective, if we can do it at the scale necessary, and then from a kind of sustainability perspective, like when we pump it all into the ground, what could happen, and what are some of the negative impacts that could come from that. And so Senate Bill 1289 basically puts some brakes on those efforts and makes sure that we will have the safety, the safety guardrails, guidelines in place before we start pumping the carbon into the ground. Um, so from our district, we also had a few pieces of legislation. So the first being House Bill 4895. You all might notice at this point kind of a theme. A lot of our legislation comes, well, almost all our legislation comes from the district and from constituents, but a lot of them also come from students who are constituents. And so House Bill 4895 came because we had students who saw that in their schools they weren't getting a lot of education about climate change. And so House Bill 4895 requires fact-based coursework and teacher preparation programs that will teach our students about the history and the future of climate change. Um, Also part of that on that theme of legislation coming from students, from teachers, from our schools, we have House Bill 4130, which designates September as Waterway Cleanup Month. And so that actually was adopted as part of Senate Resolution 702. So Senate Resolution 702 makes this September a Waterway River Cleanup Month. We are continuing to work on other bills. House Bill 5021 is an example of that. So it did not pass the House, but it has generated some really, really good conversation around the Illinois, IMEA, sorry, Illinois Municipal Electric Agency. That is the agency that provides power to Naperville Electric. And so it is powered by several coal-fired power plants, including the Prairie State Power Plant down in downstate Illinois. And so this bill will just require greater transparency from IMEA, from those groups, those electric co-ops, so that we can see, in more detail, with more clarity, what are their plans to move away from coal to a more sustainable power source.
So Janet, we have a couple of questions on the environment. One of them is you had a great lead in there with IMEA. The question is what are you doing about the contract with IMEA and the coal plant that Naperville gets the majority of its power from?
Yeah, so so the district includes, of course, Naperville, Bolingbrook, and Warrenville. So this question is mainly for Naperville people. Unlike most of the rest of the state, the northern part of the state, instead of getting our power from ComEd, we get our power from the Naperville Electric Utility. And I guess from that question, they already know that Naperville Electric Utility gets its power from IMEA and coal. And so House Bill 5021, it really is one of the main ways that we're trying to get Naperville off of coal. So by requiring IMEA to have a plan to move off of coal, by making that plan transparent and open to criticism and scrutiny, I think that's very important, that kind of transparency. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is heighten the voice of community members who, including myself, who are very concerned about where we get our power from. And so through that bill, through forums that we've been a part of and that we plan to host in the future, through conversations with stakeholders, getting everyone to the table, making sure that we are all on the same page and we're getting the information that we need from one another. Those are some of the main ways that I think from the state rep position, I can make the most difference and be the most helpful. I will say ultimately, where Naperville sources its power from will be a decision that Naperville City Council people will have to make. But in the meantime, we will do our best to make sure the community and the city council members have all the information that they need to make a good decision when they have to come and do that vote.
All right, I just want to remind people that some questions were sent ahead because we had a Google form that people could fill out, and some are appearing also in our chat on Facebook Live. So this one comes from the chat. It says, for sustainable environment, are the concerns of food access and affordability addressed? We're discussing a sustainable environment.
I think food access, affordability, sustainable environment, kind of those topics, we address them in a few different ways. First, food affordability generally is very important. We have food deserts throughout the state, actually, in all the way from Chicago to downstate. And so we have passed a few pieces of legislation that are trying to address those, making sure that the state is supporting those communities. We have various programs in place to support like sustainable agriculture and farming practices. I sponsored a bill on cover crop supports. So that is one of the most popular programs in the state, and it is one that helps with, I think, crop yield, but it's also a very good environmental practice as well. So there are just actually a number of ways that we're trying to address that important topic in the House. All right, so moving on, as I had mentioned, education, public schools generally, higher education are super important to our district. It is the reason why so many people, move here. It's the reason why I live here and why my parents moved here more than 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Um, and so, no surprise, a lot of the work coming out of this district is very education related. So I'll just touch upon some of them. Senate Bill 3349. Very proud to work on that with a few people, including our state senator Laura Ellman. And together we worked with one of the teachers in our district, Seth Brady, who was one of the authors, the originators of the Global Scholars Program. A lot of the legislation that we've talked about over the past few years and today came from students in the Global Scholars Program. It's a program that really gives students, I think, a great world view. They're required to take kind of a number of globally oriented courses. Um, and then from that do kind of a capstone class, capstone project that synthesizes a lot of their learning into trying to address a problem with very kind of concrete outcomes. And a lot of times, those outcomes have been legislation that has passed. So this bill, though, Senate Bill 3349, expands the Global Scholars Program and allows people who might not have as extensive of resources as we do in the 41st District to also offer this program so that students can take it online and really expand their the number of classes that are available to them that would meet this Global Scholar requirements. We in the budget, one of the top priorities has been since I started to make sure that we are more equitably funding our schools. And so every year that I've been in office, including this current fiscal year 25, we have added $350 million to funding from the state to local schools. And so that has resulted in, for most of our school districts in the 41st District, millions of dollars more of funding coming from the state to the local districts, and supporting, just various learning programs, teachers, and supporting students ultimately. So I will talk about the other two bills on this page. House Bill 5406 was a very interesting one and one that was very important to me and very important to other um, to students in our district. And this is a bill that limited student athlete practice times to no more than sorry, Donna, could you remind me, was it 4 hours per day or 3 hours per day?
Our bill was 4 hours per day and
Okay.
18 hours per week. And then, yeah, and I think they've done some work on that through the IHS.
Yes.
Yep.
This is my slide, so that's my mistake. I should have put 4 instead of 3. So that one was very interesting. So this came from a student athlete in our district, and it was very much and is very much a student mental health type of bill. She came to us with these like I was not a student athlete, and so this is very surprising to me. But she came to us talking about these practices that would go on for more than 4 hours a day, which was just mind-boggling to me to think about someone being able to go to practice for a few hours in the morning, go to school, go to practice for a few hours at night, and then on top of that do their homework. And so this bill was just trying to set some very what I think were very common sense guidelines that essentially mirrored the NCAA, college level practice guidelines. Um, it was a bill that it had definitely had a lot of feedback from my colleagues. We ended up, I passed it through committee, but I did end up holding it and not bringing it for a vote on the House floor. Because in the end, we worked with the Illinois High School IHSA High School Athletic Association. Is that what that stands for? IHSA, Donna?
Illinois High School Association. It's for
Yes.
athletic. Yeah.
Okay. And they are the group that regulates athletic competitions between high schools in Illinois, and so they agreed to have their experts, their doctors, their coaches look into the issue. And very happy to report that just recently they have made a recommendation from their sports medicine advisory committee based on their April meetings that is actually recommending even more stringent practice limits than what our House bill was recommending. So so very much looking forward to seeing how that progresses, and just kudos to the student athlete who brought this to me and flagged this for the IHSA to take a look at. Uh, I'll also highlight House Bill 299. This is a bill on artificial intelligence and providing really protections around deep fakes. So, you know, essentially what's been happening in our schools is it's pretty scary. Classmates are oftentimes taking their classmates' images and likeness, using AI, using that kind of technology to create sexually explicit um, pictures, videos, or other media. And a lot of times the feedback and that we were hearing from around the state was that schools didn't know how to deal with this, because to them it was a fake image, and it was a little bit questionable whether or not they had the authority or the purview to step into something like this. And so House Bill 299 makes it very clear that school districts absolutely have the authority to do so. And so we put that kind of action under the cyberbullying policy of the school code. We were able to pass it through the House. It was a pretty last minute bill, and so it now sits with the Senate on the Senate side. And so really going to work hard over the next few months to try to get it passed through veto session, which is in the fall. So we'll keep going. Uh, women's issues, women's healthcare, very important topic to our district. And so here's just a selection of some of the things that we passed this past legislative session on the topic. So the really big one was House Bill 5142. So that deals with maternal health equity, provides coverage for pregnancy and postpartum support services. And so these are for things like doulas, midwives, home births, lactation consultants, and breastfeeding supplies. When you look at the statistics, I think the CDC, for example, found that more than 80% of pregnancy-related deaths that happened between 2017 and 2019 were preventable. And so this legislation tries to make sure that people are really getting the care that they need to prevent those deaths, and to have better health outcomes for mother and baby. House Bill 581 around emergency abortions basically allows doctors to provide abortion to patients that are experiencing a life-threatening condition, like an ectopic pregnancy or preeclampsia, or that high blood pressure that sometimes women get. The Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, so this is called also known as EMTALA, it does require emergency departments to treat and stabilize every patient. But what we have found, real life cases of emergency departments and emergency physicians who actually weren't sure if they were allowed to provide these emergency services. And so House Bill 581 makes very clear that physicians and their patients are entitled to these treatments. I also worked with worked with a senator on Senate Bill 3547 on mammography information updates. Basically, requires the Department of Public Health to update their mammogram screening and early detection information to what's the most uh, to the latest guidance and latest research. So so next, if you recall from the slide on objectives, we have diversity inclusion running throughout the whole, underlying all the objectives that we pursue. And so within this, I think it's good to highlight some of the things going on with the disability community, which is very, very active and very engaged part of our community. And just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've talked about and brought forth from their concerns. So House Bill 4277, it's around deals with American Sign Language, and what we were finding was our school districts were not able to hire teachers from out of state who had ASL endorsements on their teacher licenses because our state did not recognize that. So drafted a bill to make sure that ISB, the State Board of Education, would recognize that endorsement. This is another example of introducing a bill and then, very very nicely spurring some action from the department. And so ISB is now working on that to make sure that ASL is part of that teacher license endorsement. As part of this body of work in the fiscal year 25 budget, so the one that just passed, we were able to add in a $1 per hour increase to direct service personnel DSP wages, and so this just continues our efforts to continue trying to raise those wages and get them to a more competitive level. So I think last year we had $2.50 wage increases, $1 and $1.50 from the 2 years prior as well. A piece of legislation that we will continue working on. Hopefully, this is another one that working with colleagues to get this passed through the veto session is House Bill 4470, and that would give some property tax exemptions to community integrated living arrangements. So these SILAs are one of the ways that we serve those with disabilities in our community. It lets them live in a home care setting, in a small group setting. And we have a handful of these in our community, and providing these property tax exemptions would be a good way to incentivize people to consider offering their homes for these SILAs, and really trying to address some of the shortages that we're seeing around these living arrangements around care for the disability community.
Janet, there's one that overlaps with diversity and then also education. There was a question that said, for school nutrition, did the bill that was proposed that proposed availability of kosher and halal meals pass? And I did put the link to the bill in the chat, but I don't know if you wanted to take just a minute to talk a little bit about that bill.
Sure. And you know what? There are so many bills. I am pretty sure that did not make it to the House for a floor vote. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Yes. Okay, Donna.
Yep.
Yes. And that one, the fact that it didn't pass, that it didn't make it onto the House floor, what was pretty disappointing to me. I was one of the I was the original bill sponsor on that, and then I gave it to one of my colleagues to work on and in our community in the 41st district, and actually our summer intern program, there were a number of students that this would have affected and would have been, very, very helpful and very much, I think, appreciated and welcomed within their school experience. Um, but it's a tough one to pass because there's just some questions around the constitutionality of the state saying that schools must provide these halal and kosher meals. So, um, still working with the bill sponsor, with stakeholders, with lawyers to make sure that these bills will these if they become law, pass constitutional muster.
And then I was trying to get the link for that, so I don't know. Did you explain the photo in this one? Because I thought that was a really
Oh,
interesting.
thank you for that reminder. Um, this one, the picture here is with the women and their family members of Jessa Dallop, and Jessa Dallop is a group that uh, basically encourages and promotes the entrepreneurship of people with disabilities. And so these young women, they actually published a recipe book, and were so nice to give me a copy. So we passed the House Resolution 727 to honor their work and to make sure that my colleagues and I recognized it. And we're also doing our part to make sure that we were encouraging entrepreneurship and these ongoing kind of promotion of the dignity of work for people with disabilities. And so you can see in the picture here, we're so lucky to be able to go see the Speaker of the House, Emmanuel Chris Welch. And so there we are in his office, just taking a nice picture with him. Now, I will try to fly through a little bit because I know we have a few more slides and I don't want to keep anyone too long. But again, the business and economy, very important topics in our district. And so some of the ways that we've tried to support it is through capital investments. So in the last almost 4 years that I've been in office, we've been able to return $4.6 million to projects in the district. So this is for parks, playgrounds, various projects throughout Naperville, Bolingbrook, and Warrenville. We worked on Senate Bill 2979. This is BIPA reform. BIPA is the Biometric Information Privacy Act. This was one that was very important to the Naperville Chamber and its members around creating some statutory limits around BIPA. And Senate Bill 2682, another one that I worked very closely with Senator Ellman and the women from Project or Vision 1948. And this is so 1948 was the last time that there was parity between men and women in the technology sector, and this Women in Technology Task Force is trying to get us back to parity because right now it's at a pretty dismal, I think, like 30% women, and so. I was actually just named to this task force, and our goal is to basically establish policy and legislative recommendations to increase the share of women in technology.
We had another question. Many local restaurants express concerns about the fair wage bill. Can you explain if you think it's going to resurface in veto session?
Sure, sure. I will, of course, caveat my answer here with I have been wrong, very wrong before, but I think at this point, the fair wage bill, um, I don't think it will be resurrected. Let me first explain what it is. Basically, the Fair Wage Bill requires that tipped workers who right now have an exemption from the minimum wage would be paid the minimum wage in addition to their tips. And so this is one where, I have to thank the community and business owners, and in particular restaurant owners and the Naperville Chamber for coming together so quickly and really, I think, educating people like me and other legislators on kind of what the business environment looked like or looks like for them. So it was in those conversations. It was in just sitting down with one another and talking, where I think the concept or the issues that the Fair Wage Bill was trying to address, um, in a lot of ways, I think existing legislation actually already addresses the issue. Existing legislation basically says that if you're a tipped worker, if your tips, when added up, do not get you to minimum wage, then your employer has to make up the difference. And so, the fact that that wasn't necessarily happening, seems like more like a enforcement issue rather than something where you have to, rather than making sure that everyone gets minimum wage in addition to the tips, in addition to tips. And so I think the way this would um, live on in the future would probably be more of addressing that enforcement aspect of existing laws. Now, I think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time also on the fiscal year 25 budget. Uh, I keep calling it the fiscal 25 budget because the fiscal year every year runs from basically July 1 to June 30th. So July 1 of 24 to July 1 of 2024 to June 30th of 2025, and that's referred to as the fiscal year 25 budget. So this is the sixth balanced budget in a row that we've passed. And compared with fiscal year 2025, it represents a 1.3% increase in the budget. And so you can see like a teeny tiny surplus that's been built in with about 53.3 billion in revenue and 53.1 billion in spending. I've touched upon, throughout the slides, some of the big expenditures, some of the big priority areas like education, like healthcare. One of the things I want to note is the additional almost $200 million that was deposited into the rainy day fund. And so that brings that total in that fund to over well over $2 billion. And it's actions like that, like passing balanced budgets, doing very like measured increases, and depositing money into that rainy day fund, which has led to 9 credit rating upgrades in just the last 3 years, and that's across the all 3 of the major credit rating agencies in the U.S. You can see this. You might not be able to see the details, but this chart basically shows those credit rating increases occurring at the far right hand side of the chart.
So one question that we had, Janet, was how is it possible to say that we have a balanced budget when the state has such excessive pension debt?
Um, that's a very fair question. So from a very technical standpoint, I will say a balanced budget technically means that our state's plan for spending equals its plan for revenue, and so in that sense, it is balanced. And when you kind of bring in debt into it, like when you bring in pension obligations or bond obligations, I like to liken it to like a household budget. So like in a household budget, what you bring in through your paycheck has to basically match what goes out in your spending. Um, and things like for the state, like lower than expected expenses or higher than expected revenues will kind of move that budget around. But in the end, a balanced budget basically means that the state has to pay its pension and its debt obligations, like so those payments, like that mortgage payment or that car payment, but it doesn't have to pay like that whole mortgage, right? And that you don't have to pay for that whole car all at once. So, in the past, when I say that, prior to these past 6 years, there was an unbalanced budget, what was happening was, legislatures were basically not making those pension payments and not making those bond payments. And so that's how we have really gotten into this awful mess of having such huge pension obligations because people weren't paying them in the past. So, now we are actually making those payments, and we've actually been paying more than what's owed to try to catch up. It is a huge, huge Titanic of a ship to turn around, but I do think it's turning around just little by little every year.
So as we head to this next slide, we have a question that I want you to keep in mind because you'll probably answer it through the slide. But it says, what is being done to continue health and safety in and around our community?
Sure. Um, Well, from a health and safety perspective, I think from the health perspective, we talked a lot about healthcare, and healthcare accessibility. From the public safety perspective, I think there are a few ways here that I've highlighted. A lot of it is via the budget. So in this most current budget, for example, we have allocated $60 million for body cameras and for data storage for local law enforcement. We have added $5.3 million to fund two new Illinois State Police cadet classes. I don't have the numbers off, at the top of my head, but I think in the last week there were some really great numbers by the Illinois State Police that were released, showing that they have, because of those increases in state police cadet classes, because of more resources that we've been putting their way, they have really, really upped their crime clearance rates and really been able to lower like expressway shooting numbers. And so you see some really actually great results from there. Um, another set of monies that we put forth was $8 million for the Illinois Emergency Management Agency and the Office of Homeland Security. So that's really to address, for example, terrorism, domestic terrorism threats. Um, very, very important one for the state. Uh, we every December we have a survey. A community survey to ask people, what are your priorities? And one of the things that was flagged for us this year was people wanted more on public safety, and so we started maybe what will be a continuing series on this. But in February, we had a citizen advisory panel where we did a deep dive with Senator Ellman and with the Naperville Police Chief Jason Aries to talk about kind of some of those crime statistics, what the Naperville police are seeing, and I will be partnering with other state reps in the Bolingbrook and the Warrenville area to do the same for those communities. And then, so the picture here is with Chief Bucknitis, our Naperville fire chief, and I've been working closely with him and his organization on a central emergency management center in the city of Naperville. Tried to we got capital dollars basically to build a central emergency management center to address things like if there were another tornado that to hit Naperville, being able to address those issues quickly and with good coordination. Now, thank you everyone for sticking with us for this far, for the legislative part of the town hall. I do want to make sure everyone knows to follow any of the things that I've just been talking about from a legislative perspective. Just go to ilga.gov and you can see every single bill that we've introduced or passed or are working on, and then we will. We'll continue working on and they'll get posted. And in I think subsequent town halls and other events. We'll make sure we always refer to this page as a good way to for constituents to keep track of what's going on.
So we did have a question from the community. How do you decide which bills to draft and focus your attention on each year?
Sure. The objectives, those objectives that we covered in the beginning, like on education, on business and economy, good government, that's one of the, I think, organizing principles and one of the guiding lights for the office. Um, we want to make sure that we are responding to constituent concerns, and so a lot of those ideas come from constituents, and we do a lot of work to see if legislation is the way to do it, or again, if contacting a state office or state department makes more sense. Um, but on the in terms of constituent generated um, activities and research and legislation, I think that's a good segue into the next slide, um, where we have our summer intern program. And I am, Donna is the mastermind behind our summer intern program, and they are doing such great work led by Donna. I'm gonna pass it on over to her to talk about that program and talk about a little bit more about what's going on in the district.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, we have a super team of 14 interns this summer. They are just phenomenal, working super hard and such enthusiasm, and they really care about what our constituents have to say. And they are at our doors, trying to meet you, trying to hear from you, and then bringing back ideas that they're working on. So I actually have a list I'm going to read so I don't miss anything here. There's so many things that they're working on, but some of the highlights are PFAS and the effect it has on our firefighters is something they're looking into. Supplement regulations, particularly for dietary supplements and muscle gaining supplements for those under the age of 18, deceptive labeling of recycling materials, temporary safe storage of firearms for those who may be experiencing some mental health issues, looking at some uh, guidance on homeschooling, researching the loneliness epidemic, and if there's something we can do to address that, and also some research on AI generated deep fake images. And that's just a little tip of the iceberg. There's so much more they're working on, but yeah, they're excited, and we hope that you get to meet them at your door. They are walking around with our legislative flyer so that you know how to contact the office and some of the services that we provide. You can contact us through our email address that's here or through the phone. And I just want to point out our museum pass as well. That's something that the interns have been working on with me to make sure that we are addressing all of the requests that we have for our museum pass. So that's available for you and up to 3 guests, and you can request that on our website. They also are sharing with our constituents more information about upcoming events and our monthly newsletter. If you don't get our monthly newsletter, Janet does a really great job of keeping it to just really the highlights of what's happening in the district and in Springfield. And we send that out once a month and really try to keep our community informed and give you some insight into what it is that we're working on all the time. And we also have events each month. And so the upcoming events that we have, our big one is August 17th. We have our Heroes and Helicopters. This is our third annual community showcase. It's over at Frontier Sports Complex. We celebrate our heroes, which are our first responders, but we have lots of heroes in our community that revolve around a lot of our non-for-profits. And so along with Senator Ellman's office, we will host this event that we've had. It has some touch-a-truck aspects. It has a medical helicopter landing and just an opportunity for you to see some of the services that a lot of non-for-profits and state agencies provide to our families as well. Each month we host a coffee and conversation, and so that one will be July 27th this month, and it kind of varies from month to month. So you just have to take a look and see. A lot of times we do it at the last Saturday, but we've had to change that for some holidays and things. And then we also have our mobile museum of tolerance coming in October, which is kind of a big deal. It's a trailer bus that we will bring to the Naperville Public Library. They're so nice to host us again. We did this, I believe, in 2021, and so we're bringing it back. It's just a interactive video, mostly used for schools, but this time we're going to have it more as an open house to our community so that they can see some of the experience some of the videos and the interactive programs that the Mobile Museum of Tolerance offers. It'll be here for 3 days in October. And I don't have a slide for it, but I know we talked about the September waterway cleanup. And so we have a question coming up on that, Janet, but I just want to remind people that we will have an event also for September waterway cleanup month. And we're going to partner with students and teachers in our community to do that this September. We don't have a date yet. That's why we don't have a slide for it. But for the questions, Janet, there's a couple of more questions that were submitted. I'll start with the waterway cleanup because there's a question about what is being done to support Indigenous Native Americans' efforts to assist keeping clean waterways and waterway systems. So, I mean, that's just a small part what we're doing, but I figured you could start with that.
Sure. I don't know that there's anything. I'm looking at the question. I don't know that there's anything like specifically to support Indigenous Native American efforts. I think more generally, of course, there are, the Senate resolution that I talked about that, is is a good start, I think, in making sure that the topic is um, top of mind for people. And so, if of course anyone in the community uh, feels moved by that, we would love to have you in September and have you join us in those cleanup efforts. I was looking at some of the questions ahead of time as you were going through your slides, and I see there are just some interest around supporting Indigenous Native American communities generally, and so that might be a good time to highlight some of the legislation that came through along those topics. Um, in Illinois, for example, I think there were efforts to basically hand over land that was part of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources to those indigenous people, and then also one around looking. I think it was a task force essentially to look at removing those depictions and mascots uh, from schools. So it's something that, for example, I think Naperville Central High School did many years back, moving from, were they the Redskins and they moved to the Red Hawks, I think. Um, and I think the initial thought around that bill was just mandating that every single school do follow suit, essentially. But, as part of the legislative process, you hear from constituents, you hear from stakeholders and their concerns. And I think when we talk to some of those downstate schools, it wasn't that they didn't want to change, but they did highlight for us some of the difficulties they would face in doing so, mainly from a funding perspective. And so we did also pass a bill that creates a task force to look into, what kind of supports would some of these schools need in order to make that transition. And that was actually one of the most powerful, some of the most powerful House presentation and debate that I've seen. The way the bill sponsor presented it and really emphasized, kind of the dignity of people and how you can't make people into your mascots like that, and how hurtful it is for students when they see that. And so I think that was a good compromise bill. I think a lot of us want more action and will support continued action in that area.
I know that this is not necessarily about Native Americans, like, living in and around our community, but I believe there's a bill too, Janet, that passed that talked about our museums returning any remains of Native Americans to their tribes for the dignity and burial that they would normally do. So I believe that there was something in that too, isn't there? Or that we passed?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, um, and sorry, at the top, it's hard to find those at the tip of my tongue, but what we can do is within the chat, we can follow up with some bill numbers too, once we do a little digging.
Okay. And then there's one last question that came ahead of time but didn't fit in any of our slides really. So what is being done to cap apartment rental rates? Some of us can afford to buy and live in a house but choose not to for a variety of personal reasons. For us and those that can't afford a house, we should not be fleeced with our earnings to cover rates that don't match our common economic reality. We need to prevent a San Francisco environment here and hopefully start a national positive, sane cost of housing movement. And I just read that word for word so that we captured it. So yeah.
Yeah, affordable housing, I think, is very important, and comes up a lot with constituents. So we're trying to address it in a few ways. Property taxes, of course, are very key to that. And so I talked a little bit before about education funding, because the vast majority of our property taxes go to our schools. And so, the plan is, like, for the state to continue increasing its funding for public schools, so that lifts some of the burden off of local taxing bodies, local school districts. We Besides school districts, your municipalities also are big taxing bodies, and so some of the kind of the revenue package that we passed this fiscal for this fiscal year also will increase funds going to local municipalities. So that should help as well. And property taxes, of course, don't just affect the property owner, because those property taxes will show up in rent as well. So those are some of the ways. And then from a very local level, I think our Naperville City Council probably, or and sorry, our other Warrenville and Bolingbrook kind of governing bodies, they also play a big role in that. In for example, approving those affordable housing units. And so one of the other things that we've done to try to make sure that we're supporting our constituents is, we try to elevate their voices as well, and write letters of support for those projects as well. So I think with that, I don't think we have any more questions, and so I just want to thank everyone for spending your evening listening, and sending in your questions, and for your engagement, and for your care into what's going on in the community, and what's going on in Springfield. I uh, I want to also end this with an open invitation to anyone who might be in Springfield. Uh, it is the People's House. The state capitol is the People's House, and you are always welcome. If I am there, I am always happy to host you and to take you around. If I'm not there, we can always try to find someone to take you on a tour, so that you can see just how beautiful the Illinois state capitol is. I actually just came from a soccer tournament in Virginia where I got to see the Virginia state capitol. And I had to say, the Illinois state capitol is known to be one of the most magnificent in the country, and just based on some of this other state capitals I've seen, I have to agree. So please come by and see us. And thank you all for again joining us. Please never feel shy about sending your questions, sending comments, your thoughts to us, or joining us in any of the other activities that we have. Again, these town halls happen about twice a year, um, but there are so many other ways to make your voice heard, and to join us for community events, for our monthly coffee and conversation, um, and just other panels, other things that we have going on. If you go to repyangroar.com and go to the events page, you can see all the things that are currently going on, and you can see actually I think past events too, just to give you a flavor for how you can be a part of it all. So thank you very much.